Right, right. No, if cold calling were easy, your boss would still do it. My name's Chip Meyers, and I'm with the Entrepreneur's Source, and I'm a career ownership coach. And what that means is that I get to work with people all over the US and all over Canada that are just in a transition point in their professional lives. And I assist them in getting some clarity about what direction they may want to take their lives going forward based on their goals, their needs, their expectations, their vision for what they want life to look like in the future. And I try to help them broaden that search, and we do that by providing education and awareness and discovery about entrepreneurial career paths and giving people a chance to figure out, hey, might that be a better way to achieve my goals than by working for someone else. Prior to doing this, I was in the corporate world, like most of the people that I work with. I always describe myself as a recovering salesperson. For about 27 years, I worked for a variety of different companies, and as I say, I sold things and I managed people. And I did that across a number of different industries. And really, I had a great corporate career until I didn't. So it's interesting. I don't know that I defined that this was the right time for me to get out on my own more than my previous company defined it for me. So I was one of those people that was, we'll call it, involuntarily separated from payroll, and that sent some shockwaves through my life. I had, again, up to that point, I had a very successful career, and here I am, 50 years old. My wife doesn't work full time. I have a daughter in college. I have another daughter that's in high school planning to go to college. I'm the primary income provider for my family, and now all of a sudden that rug has been pulled out from under me. So my initial reaction was just like everybody else's. Oh, I've got to get a job. I have to do all these things. And at some point, I just started to think a little bit different. Wait, why do I want a job? Well, I want a job because I need income. I've got to provide benefits. Okay, well, hold on. Are there other ways to do that where I don't have to have a job? And so all of my fears and all of my worries and kind of my negative self-talk and head trash, I just kind of turned those into questions and sought answers. And for me at least, it became very clear that I do not suffer well in captivity, and I needed to find a path forward where I could create my own success rather than continuing to create it for somebody else. My challenges in that transition were I thought I knew so much, and I really had to unlearn a lot of things that I thought I knew. I had only ever known the path of employee, right? You work for somebody, you get the steady weekly paycheck, you have this, what I realize now is kind of this illusion of security and stability. But if you don't have control, you never really have security and stability. But I did have to learn that was a big change. It was not only a big change for me, but it was a big change for my family and just thinking different. I'm very blessed. I'm very fortunate. My wife was very supportive of me educating myself on different paths and what was possible, because she knew that I had been really unhappy and unfulfilled for most of my career because I had done things that I had to do, not things that I wanted to do. Like I said, I was a salesperson, and I'm probably like the worst profile in the world for a salesperson. I don't like to initiate conversation. I'm an introvert. I'm all the things on the checklist that should say, no, you should never get into sales. But I learned how to do those things, and I did them because that's what it took to support my family. But when I had the option to think, what if I don't have to do those things anymore, and I can support my family? My wife was really supportive of that idea, and my family was, because they knew I was miserable. When I went through all of this, I didn't discount that there still might be a path for me in the corporate world. And again, that's all I knew. So I kept trying to get the interviews and doing all of those things. But as a 50-year old, it's not like they were beating down my door for sales roles, right? So I knew I did need to expand the search a little bit broader. But when I started looking into entrepreneurial possibilities, I did so based more on my past and my resume rather than what I really wanted going forward. And so it had to shift a little bit. And it was the process of going through this and doing the analysis and talking to different companies. Even now, I tell my clients, you don't know what you're looking for until you start looking for it. You might think you do, but it's the process of discovery that might lead you in new directions. And everything I was initially looking at was very similar to what I had always done. It was selling things, it was managing people. And yet, in the back of my mind, that was the life I was trying to get away from. But I had to figure that out on my own. Nobody could have told me that. And that's really what this discovery journey did, is it gave me the chance to validate that this is no longer what I want. I want something else. I've got a different vision for myself. And once I had figured that out, then it was more, okay, what aligns with my vision for the future? What's out there where I don't have to sell anything, where I don't have to manage people, where I don't have to travel, where I don't have to I could create a long list of the don't have tos. One of the things that we went through, and I think everybody goes through this, it is just that initial fear, right? Because now you're being forced into the unknown. And I'm not talking necessarily even about getting into business for yourself, but if you've lost a job, you've been forced out, your company is closed, there's this unknown. And so there's a natural tendency to want to cling to what you know, right? It's kind of that, again, that illusion of safety. And so when you think about starting to do something different, whether it's a business or whether it's a job, if it's anything different than what you've done in the past, it's going to feel uncomfortable. So you kind of have to get comfortable with that feeling of being uncomfortable, and call it risk or call it fear. I mean, risk tolerance and fear are really kind of synonymous. Um, and they're also normal. Now, to some degree, you can start to quantify risk, and you need to do that. You need to kind of assess, what is it that I'm afraid of. For most people, it is that fear of failure, that fear of the unknown. What happens if I fail? But what you have to realize is, I'm not familiar with anything that doesn't have risk. And if you know of something without risk, I would love to hear about it, because I don't know, right? You go back and you work for somebody else. Well, there was going to be risk that I'd end up in the same position again, right? Or I would be miserable again. So I didn't see a job as any more risky than starting a business, because I knew kind of what I wanted. So I think you have to take stock of that stuff. I think you have to be real honest with yourself with what you're afraid about or what you're afraid of, and turn that fear into questions. Because how do you combat fear? With information. Evidence defeats doubt, right? So for all of those things that you're worried about, make that part of the search. Make that, these are the things that I need to get answers about. And the more you know, the more comfortable you'll get. Yeah, thinking about the financial side of getting into business for yourself. That's one of the fears that pops up, whether people admit it or not. It's, what is this going to look like? And again, I'm used to getting this paycheck every 2 weeks that makes it feel like I've got security. My perspective is control equates security more than anything else, but still, that's familiar. And when you've never been forced to think about it, all of a sudden not having that creates this panic. So you do need to kind of take stock. And when I went through this, obviously there were financial considerations. Like I said, I was the primary income provider for the house. All the benefits that my family got were through my employment. So how am I going to deal with that? And we did have to take stock of our financial situation, right? We did have to look at kind of a budget. What do I need, right? It's hard to focus on your goals if your needs aren't being met. So what are my needs? And certainly we retrenched a little bit. We tightened the belt. Most people can do that. Now, some people can't, and right, everybody's got different situations. And if the needs are more important than the goals at that time, then maybe getting into business for yourself is not the right thing. But in my case, we looked at it, and I was willing to retrench. I was willing to kind of dig in a little bit and pull back, because I knew, but that by doing that, that was what was going to propel me forward. So we figured out what we needed from a financial standpoint. And one of the things I figured out was I needed to keep income coming in while I was starting up the business. That was something I was terrified about. That led me down different paths of funding strategies. How can I get something started and continue to bring in some income while I'm doing that? That became really the driver for my determining the funding strategy. And once I figured out that there were ways to do that, that eliminated that fear a little bit. And so now I'm one step closer, right? I'm knocking down all the obstacles that were in my path. I think people have more transferable skills into doing something for themselves than they give themselves credit for. Right. I kind of always viewed myself as like a jack of all trades and a master of none, which in the corporate world, that can be a problem, right? Corporate world tends to favor linear. Like, here's what you've always done, so here's what you always must do. But this kind of broad base, because I had dealt with so many different types of companies and I had worked in so many different industries, it kind of gave me this situational fluency and just being able to talk to people and what they've done and what industry they've come from. You wouldn't think of that as a transferable skill, but it certainly was for me. So I do think that most people have those. They have skills, they have strengths that are transferable, and you just have to take stock of that, and you have to think about it. And it's the strengths more than the skills that propel you forward, right? You can learn skills, but the strengths are the things that you lean on, right? Do you have a strong support system? Are you resilient? Right? Can you just buckle down and get through things? Are you a grinder? Do you work hard? Everybody's got those things, and those are always leverageable. There is a lot. I feel I'm much better equipped now to be in business for myself than I was when I started getting into business for myself. Um, looking back, and even at the time, I didn't feel like I had what it took to start something from scratch. All right. And that's kind of this peak of entrepreneurialism. Everybody hears the story about the overnight success stories. By the way, those are lies. Nobody's an overnight success story. But starting something from scratch just requires something different. I mean, you're in the ocean by yourself, and you're trying to navigate and row and fight off the sharks and everything. I wasn't equipped to do that. Even buying an existing business, I didn't feel like I was equipped to do that because I had never run a business for myself. Now I had budgets, and I had managed and hired people and all of that. So I had some of those skills. That's one of the things that really kind of led me down the franchise road was is having structure, having support, having processes, having systems, having things that I can leverage, right? Having somebody in my corner, having the bat phone, somebody that I can call when I was having trouble. Now that I've done this for 7 years, right, and I understand how to run a business, one of the curses of what I do is now I see, oh, I could be successful in this. I could be, right. You figure out that I can be successful in anything, because the dirty little secret is it's not the business that's going to make you successful to begin with, right? It's always you that's going to make you successful. And I don't think I knew that until I had been doing this for a while. So everybody talks about work-life balance, and I hate that phrase, okay, because work-life balance makes it seem like it's a trade-off, right? Everything's fine when it's here, but if work is good, then life. So it's more about work-life equilibrium and how everything works together. Okay, and that was big for me. I was probably more focused on that than I was even focused on income potential, quite frankly, because I was going into a season of my life where I had some family issues. My father's health was diminishing, and I knew that at some point I was going to have to jump into action. And now I didn't know how quickly I was going to have to jump into action. That happened much sooner than I thought, but thank goodness I was in business for myself, because I was able to do that. Right. I was 6.5 hours away from my father. And for the first several years of my business, I was getting pulled in lots of different directions. I would have to drop everything and drive and jump into action. And it kind of became a joke a little bit that I didn't run a home based business. I ran a car based business. I ran a highway based business and a parking lot based business because I, I was having to leave and drive and stop in the gas station parking lot and talk to clients and walk into the stairwell of the hospital with my laptop and my cell phone. But I'm so thankful that I had this and that I was doing this because I just would not have been able to, I wouldn't have been able to drop everything if I was in the corporate world. I would not have had that flexibility. And I was able to kind of continue and successfully run my business while attending to the things that were really most important in my life, which was helping to take care of my dad. And if I hadn't been in business for myself, I don't know how that would have happened. And I hate the thought of what could have happened if I was not able to do this. Yeah, so it really became more of working to live rather than living to work. Like that's always this thing, and not having to arbitrarily keep a 9 to 5 schedule, right? Not I can't explain the freedom of controlling your own calendar versus your calendar controlling you, and not trading hours for dollars. Um, Again, that's why I talk about it as work life equilibrium or work life integration. When you're in business for yourself, it's not all about taking all your time off, right? You're going to have a very bad business if you don't do anything. So yeah, I absolutely work a lot when I've got the time, but what I want and what I want my life to look like takes precedence over that. And I fit the work in to balance that. And again, it's just not something I could have done if I was working to build somebody else's dreams rather than working to build my own. I get this question a lot, like, when did you know it was the right choice to get into business for yourself? How long did it take you? My perspective on that is a little bit different. Look, I am risk averse. I did not go into this without a good amount of trepidation, so I wouldn't have done it in the first place if I didn't see it as really the best path forward. So I knew that from the get-go, and I'm a big proponent of burning the boats. So once I sailed across this lake, there was no going back. I did not allow myself to have a plan B, because if you have a plan B, you'll take it. So I did all the work on the front end to figure out that this was going to be a good decision. And once I made the choice to go forward, I was going to work real hard to make sure I was right about that. Now, I would say, just in my case, and I don't want to project, right? But in my case, really within a year, I was comfortable, and I was kind of back to where I had been from like a financial and earnings standpoint. Everybody's different. Again, I was focused so much on the lifestyle component of things because that's what I had never focused on. I was always focused on chasing the dollar, when I was in the corporate world. And when I stopped chasing the dollar, it's kind of when I found it. Franchising it's a vehicle within the concept of entrepreneurship, right? If you have to work, right, you essentially have two choices. You work for somebody else or you work for yourself. But even when you work for yourself, you've got these different paths that you can take, like I talked about. You can start a business from scratch. You can buy an existing business. You can invest in a franchise. I invested in the franchise route, and again, for me, that was the right path. When people hear that word, yeah, they think about big investments and royalties and fees and all of these kind of things. One of the things, coming from a sales or business development background, right, is I've had straight commission sales jobs. And so when people tell me, well, I don't want to pay royalties back to a franchisor, I'm like, okay, well, I'm thinking about my history, right? And let's say if pick a random number. Let's say a franchise has a 10% royalty. I can think back to my previous life. I never had a commission plan where I kept 90% of the revenue that I generated. So 10% sounds pretty good to me. And it's about what you get in exchange for that, right? It's what the support and the future vision and being part of something and having access to, as I describe it, this network of like-minded individuals, are you getting that in exchange for what you're paying? And if you are, so be it. The upside greatly, outweighs the small percentages that I pay in terms of royalties. Franchising at its core is really all about systems and support and those resources. Again, that's what makes it such a great path, especially for a first-time entrepreneur who's never been down this road, and you kind of don't know everything that you're going to get, or you don't know everything you're going to have to do, right? And investing in a franchise, at least in theory, kind of leapfrogs you ahead of those first couple of years if you're starting something from scratch, where you're just fumbling, right? One way to think about it is that a franchise company has already made all the mistakes for you. You get to leverage what somebody else has created, and you get the roadmap. Now, the roadmap itself doesn't do it. You still got to, right? You still got to bring the energy and the effort, but it gives you direction, and it gives you support, and it gives you a fallback. And that's really what I needed. I needed the fallback. I was confident in my abilities. You give me a plan and you help me understand why the plan makes sense, and I can go out and execute on it pretty well. But it's having that ability to reach out to somebody if things do go off the rails. What do I need to do here? What do you recommend? And having relationships with other people in the system that have been there before you, that you can reach out to and say, here's what's going on in my business. Have you encountered this? How did you get through it? So yes, it's systems, and yes, it's processes, but it's also that network of all the people that have been there before you. And that's so critically important, and it's underemphasized, quite frankly. Yeah, getting into business for myself has greatly increased my confidence in my ability to retire at some point. I never really thought about it that much in the corporate world. And look, I'm not a financial guy. I'm not a numbers guy. I've got really good accountants and CPAs and tax people that help me with all of that stuff. And one of the things that I've figured out, and I'm not smart enough to explain it, but somehow I keep a lot more of what I earn as a business owner than I did when I was an employee. And if I look at the situation that I'm in now, 7 years after, of owning this business, I cannot imagine that I would have been in this spot had I kept working for somebody else. So I'm sorry I'm not doing a good job of explaining it, but somehow, some way, and I don't necessarily credit myself, maybe it's the systems, maybe it's just the process of being in business for yourself, but I'm in so much better financial position now than I would have been had I stayed working for somebody. Yes, I think about when I got started in this, and I think about what I did wrong and what I did right. And I would like to go back and slap myself if possible, because I made this choice to go forward, and then instinctively I started leaning on my past, right? I had these wonderful systems, and I had this roadmap, and I had the strategy, and yet in the back of my mind, unintentionally, I started doing what I had always done, right? And that didn't work, right? And I there was a time when I had to just be real honest and, hey, Chip, spare them your brilliance. Let's, this thing's coming off the rails. Let's just try to follow the plan. Let's just execute on the strategy. Quit thinking that you know better. And when I started doing everything right, when I started just executing and working within the system and staying within the guardrails, you know what happened? Everything worked out okay. So that's the advice that I would, and that's the advice that I give to anybody that I'm working with if they're trying to understand franchising and they're thinking about going forward, is give yourself permission to be really lousy for a little while because you're doing something different, and be okay with that. But again, recognize you've invested in systems and structure. You've been given the recipe. The recipe produces the cookies correctly. Why do you want to change the recipe? I tried to change the recipe and that just doesn't work. And that's what I would do differently. What I want people to know when they are going through this is that they are in more control than they think they are. right? Nobody can force them to do anything. You're not obligated. Nothing you can say or do is going to create any obligation on your part. So you are driving the bus, but you've got to give yourself permission. And if you are looking for reasons not to do something, you will find them, right? If you're looking for reasons to do something, you can find those too. But if you're in this journey and you're trying to understand, is this the right path forward for me? Then try to figure out why that could be the case rather than why it could not be the case. It's whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're absolutely right. Um, when I was going through this, I was coincidentally rereading Walden by Thoreau, right? Because I was in this place where my life got turned upside down and I was trying to calm down, right? So Walden is very calming. And there was a passage that jumped out, and it ended up being like my first social media post as a business owner because it hit so hard. And Thoreau said something, and I'm going to paraphrase, but by my own experience, I've found that if someone moves forward confidently in the direction of their dreams and endeavors to live the life they've always wanted, they will meet with success unexpected in common hours. And that's the big thing, is make it about you. Design your future based on your vision, not your past. And if you can find the thing that gets you where you want to be, then it's a good choice. Whether you make that choice or not, that's always up to you. But give yourself permission to find the answers so that you can make informed choices for yourself and family going forward. Whether that's getting into business for yourself, whether that's going back to the corporate world, who cares? But make this about you. Don't let anybody else make your choices for you.